This time every Saturday, we speak to the highly respected economist. Macrobusiness.com.au is where you can observe much of his work. Leith Van Onselen, who joins us on the show today. Merry Christmas, my friend. I hope you're well.
Yeah, g'day, Luke. Yes, I am well, mate. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad at all, Leith. Not too bad at all. So, I don't know anyone in the commentariat. I don't know any economist who has led the charge more than you in relation to the per capita recession or decline we've experienced now, not for one quarter, not for two, many more than that. You've led the charge on this, and we've now had 7 consecutive quarters of negative outcome for the individuals. And if you want to know why things are tough and why it feels so tough, then this is it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. The September quarter national accounts that were released this week by the ABS showed that we've got a very, very sick economy. So, the headline figure that everyone probably saw is that the economy grew by 3.3% over the quarter and 0.8% year on year. Now, that in itself is terrible. So that was the weakest annual growth in 32 years. So you got to think right back when Paul Keating was Treasurer back in December 1991, the Seattle grunge scene, Nirvana and all that stuff were just starting to come through. That's how long ago it was. I was in year 8 at school. I'm now 46. This is a long time ago. And that annual growth was actually flattered, obviously, by this massive immigration that we've got. Now, once you strip out the population growth, we all went backwards by 0.3% over the quarter and by 1.5% year on year. So our slice of the economic pie shrunk by 1.5% over the year. It's actually fallen by 2.1% since the Albanese government came to office in the June quarter of 2022. And it's the 7th consecutive decline. And the thing that makes it so nasty is that the decline in per capita GDP has been driven by the household sector, which is where you and I live.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the government sector, it's not the business sector, it's the household sector. So per capita household consumption, which is our spending essentially on goods and services and that sort of thing, fell by 1.9% over the year. So that was more than the per capita GDP decline. Now, the thing that's propped up the economy, as everyone's probably guessed, is 2 things. We've had obviously massive population growth, still running red hot, which I can go through the numbers there if you want a bit later. But and also we've got record public spending. So all of the economy's growth in the September quarter was caused by public spending, so the government spending. The private sector was dead flat. It was basically dead flat the previous quarter as well. And once you obviously strip back population growth, the private sector is going backwards. So we've got this economy that's basically been propped up by massive volumes of people coming in and also massive public spending. And one of the really alarming things that come out of this, which most people probably haven't heard about, is that Australia's productivity growth has collapsed. So our labour productivity, so what that is, that's basically how much we produce per worker, has fallen back to 2016 levels. So we've lost 8 years of productivity growth. We're getting less and less productive. And it's been caused really by, I'd say, 3 factors. So 3 main factors. So the first one, in the short term, the biggest short-term factor is we've had this massive boom in non-market government type jobs, which are very, generally low productivity. So that's all the NDIS type jobs. Just about all of Australia's jobs growth being in healthcare and social assistance and the care economy.
Yep.
And that's hurt productivity in the short term. Over the longer term, it's been caused by capital shallowing, which is what I explained a few weeks ago. So for 20 years, our population's grown a lot faster than infrastructure, business investment and housing investment. So it's meant that we've had less capital per worker, which has made us less efficient per worker. And I used the example last time that if you run a cafe and you've got 1 coffee machine and 2 staff working on it, and you can make 50 coffees an hour, if you double the number of staff to 4 working on one machine, you're not going to be able to double the number of coffees you make because they'll have to wait for each other. They'll get congested.
Yes.
You get congestion around the kitchen, all that sort of thing. That's basically what's happened to the Australian economy over 20 years. We've imported, the population's grown by 8.5 million people this century. We haven't built the infrastructure and the business investment and the housing to go with it. So we've all become less productive. And the third reason why our productivity has collapsed is that we've had a collapse in manufacturing. So, Australia used to, back in the 70s, 25% of our GDP came from manufacturing. It's now about 5%. It's the lowest in the developed world. It's collapsed because when the mining boom came along, the Australian dollar rose. That made us uncompetitive. But even more so, Luke, is we've locked in a very high cost structure across the economy. most notably by giving ourselves some of the world's most expensive energy. So, as I said last week, Australia used to have some of the lowest cost energy in the world. So, talking about electricity and gas. Now we have amongst the most high cost energy in the world, which is just ridiculous for a country that's rich in coal, natural gas, and uranium. It's crazy. And because of that, our manufacturing sector is shrinking at a rate of knots, and that's making us less productive as well, because we've just become basically this sort of a lower rent service economy. And it's a pretty nasty picture.
It is.
That you got to paint here. And I don't really see a way out of us to become a sort of high productivity, high growth economy again because we're not going to change the economic structure. The government doesn't matter who gets in. It might be a bit less on the Liberals, but they're going to continue this high immigration madness. It's pretty much locked in.
Yeah.
You'd think. And also, I can't see them, abandoning this net zero hopium, shutting down our reliable baseload power for intermittent renewables. I can't see them fixing the East Coast gas market. We've already got Twiggy Forrest building an import terminal in Port Campbell, which is going to lock us into, forever high gas and electricity prices.
Yeah.
We've got another one going up in Victoria. So I don't really see the way out here for the economy if we continue to persist with the way that we've been running it the last 20 years. It just seems like we're slowly heading towards becoming another Argentina, which used to be a rich country.
I get a sense, I could be way off here, but I do get a sense, and it follows a little on the back of Trump's election in the US, and whilst Dutton is not Trump, and Albo is not Sleepy Joe, there are some parallels. I don't know if there's the Great Awakening, or people just sick to death of having governments interfere, and when they interfere, they screw things up. But I'm not so sure there's not an appetite for someone, and it would have to be on the centre right, so it'd have to be Dutton, someone being emboldened to be a bit bold. In other words, to say, well, me too. And I was really disappointed last election. The coalition really didn't have any big ideas. And for that matter, the only idea Albo seemed to have was to pot the former government over its handling of COVID and one or two other things. It couldn't remember key economic indices and all that kind of gear. So it was, do you want an impacted tooth or an ingrown toenail? That's a choice. But I hope someone around the Liberal Party says to Dutton, hey, have a crack, mate, because the people have an appetite, because I reckon they do. But let me put this to you, mate. This is something that's concerned me and I've heard talked about, but, we talk about, and Jim Chalmers will make a thing of this, we've got wages moving again after nearly a decade of deliberate wage stifling by the Conservatives. He and the PM, they're paying a heavily unionised workforce. No problem with unions, I'm just pointing out the obvious. A heavily unionised workforce in the care economy, and particularly around aged care. I'm not saying they don't deserve more money, they do. But he's using the taxes generated by people who might get paid and then have $10 left for the rest of the week, taxes collected from those and others to fund a 15% pay increase in a heavily unionised workforce in the care economy. Have I missed something there? Other than those workers, how does that help?
No, you're spot on. I mean, just about the overwhelming majority of Australia's jobs growth in the last few years has been in the care economy. So the private sector private sector job growth has been almost zilch. They've had very little. And so basically we've become this economy that's basically we can boast about the low unemployment rate all we want, but it's because the government's basically been printing jobs using our money. And ultimately, we're not going to get decent wage growth with the productivity growth the way it is in Australia. So we have plummeted right down to the bottom of the OECD rankings in productivity growth. And ultimately, you're not going to get sustainable long-term wage growth without productivity growth. And I just can't see how this economy is going to generate high productivity growth when the whole model is around giving us some of the most expensive energy inputs in the world, which is hollowing out the economy and makes us totally uncompetitive. Our last plastics manufacturer shut down. We can't even make cans anymore to put our food in for tin. We can't refine our own petroleum. It's just ridiculous. We don't make anything here anymore.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the government just seems to be intent in just importing way more people than we can build houses and infrastructure and business investment for, which just hollows us out even more. And I'll just run this quickly. Like the national accounts actually gave us a population estimate. You can work it out by dividing aggregate GDP by per capita GDP. And in the September quarter, Australia's population grew by 168,000 people. And in the year to September, it grew by 638,400. Now, that is the equivalent of adding a Canberra and a Darwin in the year to September.
Oh.
You know, where was the houses for that? Where's the business investment? Where is the infrastructure? We don't have it. And the government, and that is near a record high. Yeah, sure, it's come down from Mount Everest, which is about 660,000, but now we're at K2. It's just insane, the volume of growth we've got. And is it improving our productivity? Absolutely not. That is statistical fact. Is it improving our quality of life? No, we've got a housing crisis. We can't build enough infrastructure. The infrastructure we do build is hideously expensive. And then we don't have enough energy or water or anything for these extra people that are coming in. And the government just seems to continually want to double down on the same failed policies we've had for 20 years while our per capita living standards go down the toilet. And that's essentially what we've got.
You're the best at this, mate. I'm taking a break after this weekend. I'll talk to you in the new year. Can I wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas? And we really appreciate your contribution every week. The number of people that say this bloke needs to be Prime Minister probably would astonish you. And I don't know if you take the pay cut, but nonetheless, a lot of people really value your contribution, mate. All the best to you and the family.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. We've got heaps to talk about in 2025. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Leith Van Onselen, macrobusiness.com.au. How about that? He hits it between the eyes. And he's not carrying a can for any political party. He was ruthless in his criticism of the previous government as he is of this. And I think he's right. It's a point I made before, and I don't want to kind of repeat it for the sake of saying, you see, Leith agrees with me, but we have an appetite. We have an appetite for a leader who will do something. Not to be Labor light, and not for a Labor leader to be Liberal light, or not to try and appease the inner city elites by saying, hey, check us out, how green's this? Just to say, we've got a country, it is, without being unkind, and we love it, stuffed. That stops with me. I'm going to do these things. Now, on the other side, they're going to say, oh, how good you blow, or how unkind, or whatever they say. But at some point, we've had enough. And if we're not at that point now, bloody hell, it's a minute to midnight. 23 after 11, after 10 in Queensland.